Hey everyone, I think we're live now. Is anyone home? Of course you're home, everybody's home right now. I'm gonna turn off the music and then we'll get this started. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the first ever in the history of Canada Steinberg Club Cubase sessions. This is the first one that we've ever done online. And further to that, it's not only the first Steinberg session, Club Cubase. I'm going to talk about Club Cubase Steinberg session in a second. Not only is it the first Steinberg event that we've done, but it's the first Yamaha Canada music event. So this is a pretty big deal for us here. Hopefully we won't have too many technical problems. I think we've got this all worked out, but if we do, bear with us. We'll get you back streaming as quickly as possible. I would like to say hello to my counterpart, Jenny. We call her JG. She's not only the OG, but she is the JG. She is showing up on your feed. Whoa, it's weird with the webcam. She's showing up as Yamaha Canada Music on your feed, and she manages our corporate communication department, and I have to thank her, and I couldn't do this without her. I'm here in my condo in Toronto, and she's somewhere on the other side of town, or maybe the same side of town. I don't know where she lives. We just work together. So, but anyway, it's a big deal, and thank you for joining us. And what's cool about this is that we run 2 sessions here in town. We run one out of Long and McQuaid downtown. There's one session that we do there, and we do another one at a great dealer, Cosmo Music, in Richmond Hill, which for those of you out of province, you may not have been there, seen them, but they're online and amazing dealer, as is Long and McQuaid, as is all of our Yamaha Canada dealers. So this is a little cool because not only just folks in Toronto can check this out, but everyone across the country can check this out. So we're pretty excited about being able to reach everyone else in this amazing country of ours as well. If you want to stay in touch with us, this is going to go well. I'm feeling good. I can feel it in my bones. This is going to be fun. I'm going to miss the interaction with you guys because normally when I get a little goofy like this, I get some feedback. But right now I'm just looking at myself and it's weird. But anyway, if you want to stay in touch with us and you want to know what's going on, there's a couple of ways to do that. I'm actually going to go, oh, look at this. Oh, is it working? Is my tech working? Come on, Canon. There it is. See? I knew it would work. Okay, so here is, this is my email. If you want to send me an email, I can put you on the list. If you want to send me an email and ask me questions about Steinberg or music, or just say, hey, tell me how much you love Yamaha and Steinberg and your new cool Steinberg headphones, I'd love to hear from you. So that's my email. That comes to me. So if you want to get on the mailing list, let me know. We also have a Facebook group, which I'm going to show you right now. This is a pretty cool way to stay in touch with us as well. Here it is here. Yamaha Canada Solutions. So if you're on Facebook and you go in and you search Yamaha Canada Solutions, you'll find us. You can request to be a member. Either JG or myself will add you, and then if you're not on the mailing list, I send the same things out every month to both the mailing list and to this group as well. So so anyway, please stay in touch. We hope to do much more of this. I'm pretty excited about the potential of this, as I said, and without further ado, let's get into it. So welcome to my home studio. For those of you that haven't attended a Toronto session before, I've kind of been in the studio business my entire life. I started actually when I was 18. I'm a little bit older than that now. But I started when I was 18 with a home studio. And in those days, it was the 80s. And in those days, there was MIDI, and computers were just a brand new thing, and we weren't doing audio. So I was like syncing up my MIDI tracks to my tape machine, and it was just really difficult and fun, but difficult. Anyway, through my journey, I ended up having my own studios, and of course, they grew in size. And at one point, I had what could be considered a commercial studio. I've worked in lots of commercial studios as well, most of the big ones here in Toronto. I even had a chance to do a little bit of traveling and do a session at a place you may have heard of called Abbey Road, Studio 2, which was pretty phenomenal. And if you email me and we can talk about that, I've got lots of cool stories about that. The one big one from that is, I hate to tell you, but your Fairchild compressor plugins sound nothing like the real thing. The real thing is so good. I can't even describe to you how amazing it is. So yeah, Fairchilds and Abbey Road, pretty awesome. Their Neumann mic collection was pretty cool too. But anyway, I digress. Back to this. So I've been working for Yamaha now for 3 years, and so I've kind of come full circle. I went from home studio and sort of built up into this big thing, and then I decided I like to sleep at night. And so I took this amazing position at Yamaha Canada Music with all these fantastic people. And now I'm back to my home studio, which is where I am right now. Since I moved back to Toronto, I was living outside of the city for a while. Since I moved back, I've been living in condos. And I know for those that live in cities across the country, the condo thing can be a little tricky. I can't work as loud as I once did, but I'm able to do lots of work here, and I don't have quite as much stuff as I used to, but I still have enough to get the job done. The song that was playing when you all showed up is a track called Can't Replace by my daughter, Siobhan Bodrug. And for those that have attended the Toronto sessions, you've all met her, and you know that I shamelessly self-promote. The reason that I'm going to use that session tonight is because it's the most recent thing I did. It's the first single she released, and so it's fresh, and it's right here, and I've got it for you. But rest assured, I will not only shamelessly self-promote my daughter. I have all kinds of sessions. Some of them are programmed. Some of them are with live instruments, live drums and guitars, and all those kinds of things. So if you stick with us over time, we'll eventually cover all those topics. I've also done a little bit of audio for picture as well. So we'll get into some of those topics as well as time goes on. Now, some of you are wondering, what's the difference between Steinberg sessions and Club Cubase? Well, this started as Club Cubase, and my very, very amazing predecessor, Dave Miner, who unfortunately has left our fine country for much sunnier pastures in California, and he now works for Yamaha Guitars down in California. I took over for him, and when he had it, it was Club Cubase, and for most of you across the country, it was Club Cubase, and it's been Club Cubase around the world forever and ever, which is amazing, and Club Cubase is a great thing. But I had this idea, what if we did a session and it's not only about Cubase? What if it's just about making music and about doing sessions and about concepts that could work for anyone, using some of the other DAWs that are available from some of our competitors and other software that's free, or any of the applications. There's so many applications these days, and I thought maybe it would be cool if we kind of always use Cubase and Nuendo and Steinberg software as our platform, but maybe we could sort of talk about things that would apply to any of these applications. So that was why we sort of did a rebrand and started calling it Steinberg Sessions. And so far, I think it's been pretty successful. Please reach out to me and tell me how successful you think it is, because we'd love to know, and we're always looking for topics, and we're always looking to refine it and make it better. So yeah, please let us know. But the idea with Steinberg Session was to take Club Cubase and just flip it a little bit and make it sort of a home studio, a recording, a music making, a whatever kind of workshop. And I wanted to make sure that people that use other applications or people that have big studios, small studios, people that have not a lot of experience, people that have tons of experience, all could get something from this. So some of the topics are pretty straightforward, some of them are pretty advanced, but I try to make sure that we talk about something that will be interesting to everyone during the sessions. So anyway, I'm just going to check in and see if any of you are asking me any questions so far. Guys, my boss is here. I've got to be really good now. Okay, you guys are all just talking to each other. You guys don't need me to answer anything here. Jenny will let me know if anything's happening here anyway. But so let's talk about. Let me give you a little tour of my home studio. You can't see it right now, and I'm not going to move my camera because I spent so long on this shot. I'm sure you can tell, it's like the framing. Anyway, I have actually not a very new PC. It's a very old custom-built PC with an i7 in it, quad core. 32 gigs of RAM, so not a crazy fast machine here, and I've got some U80 cards in it for some additional processing, but a pretty ordinary setup. This computer it's got to be, I don't know, 5-7 years old now, but it still works. Other than that, I've got these amazing. These are discontinued, but I still love them. There's Steinberg CMC controllers, and there's faders, and I've got all kinds of controllers, and I don't use them all the time anymore, but for a long time they've sort of been an important part of my sort of workflow here. The interfaces I'm using, I've got a Steinberg UR28M, which I have owned since before I worked for the company, and over here I'm testing out a UR RT4, which is pretty cool, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I may have to spend a little bit of money and get that one instead of my 28M, but for now I'm just kind of enjoying both of them. And my controller here is a Yamaha CP4 stage right now, although the new CP88 just came out and it's pretty fantastic. I'm pretty excited about that. And other than that, I really just have a little rack of some stuff left over from my last studio. There's some API stuff, you can see it back there, and a Crane Song compressor and a Joe Me compressor. And other than that, right now I'm just going into the UR interface, and the track that Siobhan's track that we're gonna break down in a second here was all done just here with this stuff. The microphone that I use is a Mojave, which is it's a really nice microphone, but it's not by any means the most expensive microphone in the world either. So, not crazy amounts of investment in equipment here. And then my speakers, which again I bought. I know it looks like I set it up this way, like the Yamaha employee thing and lots of Yamaha stuff, but actually I bought all of these things before I worked for the company as well. Because for those of you that didn't know, Yamaha kind of makes industry standard reference monitors. So I have a pair of the MSP 7s, and they've got the subwoofer as well. So for those of you that are listening right now on nice monitoring system, there's some big 808 sub kick drums in here that you can hear, and it's nice for mixing when you have a subwoofer. Highly recommended. But it's good to turn it off when you're mixing as well. You don't want to use it all the time. Then for secondary references, I've got pair of MSP 5s, and I've also got the venerable NS10Ms I bought those when I was in the 80s. Yeah, that was a long time ago. Anyway, they still sound great. They're still industry standard. Everyone trusts them, and I've been using them for so long I can't part with them. So that's about it. Pretty straight up, pretty simple. Not a lot of bells and whistles. Everything I'm doing with virtual instruments these days, unless somebody wants to play a guitar part or, that's kind of where I'm at now. But when I had my studio, I was doing like string sessions with violins and violas and cellos and bass and horns and drums, and I had 25 guitar amps, and I had all this stuff. So I love working that way as well. It's just for those of you in a condo, it's not exactly possible to do it that way. But I mix and master here, and that works great. Anyway, so let's go back to the tune here. And I wanted to talk about, because I'm not sure who all is here tonight, and I wanted to talk about a musical thing. Because we sometimes in these sessions we get into the plugins and we talk about EQs and compression, and some of my friends in Northern Ontario that run a Club Cubase up there, they got into sort of an approach to production, and this is maybe a little bit related to that, but maybe just sort of a musical strategy, which I think maybe everyone can relate to, and this doesn't have anything specifically to do with program music or live music or Steinberg software or anyone else's software. This is just kind of an approach to making music, and it's one that's worked really, really well for me over the years. So anyway, let's maybe have a listen to the tune, and I can maybe, with the screen here, I can show you the session a little bit so you can just kind of see how things set up. You can only see one of my monitors in the one screen, but you can see right behind me I've got two. And the way I set it up here is on the left are all the tracks, which is the one that's on the other camera right now. And then on the right is my mixer. So when we play through the tune here, I'll sort of move things in and out of the camera screen so you can kind of see how I have things set up. So without further ado, here is the tune. Let's go back to the beginning, shall we?
So I met someone new just the other day. Wasn't half as good as you. Still I try to forget how I felt. It didn't help. You can't just replace your yesterday, and love always finds us no matter the way. So just keep on running no matter what they say. You can't just replace your, no, you can't just replace your yesterday.
Okay, so there's the tune. Just a couple things maybe to point out here. I've got a marker track here. For those of you that don't use marker tracks, they're super handy. All you have to do is right click and add a marker track. Marker track. Marker track. And then what you can do is you can just sort of mark off different sections of your tune so you can access them quickly, and then holding shift and the numbers along the top of your keyboard will let you skip to each one. So it's super easy and super handy, and it's going to come in handy tonight because one of the things I wanted to talk about was just building an arrangement and how do we, obviously this is a pop song. Oh, hang on a sec. I think we've got our first question. Oh, it's from my daughter, Siobhan. Hey, Dad, when you're finished with the Steinberg thing, can you help me with my essay, please? Sure, Bonbon, I can help you with that. I don't know how many of you are parents out there, but certainly parenting is a little different with schoolwork happening at home. Thanks, Siobhan, for that question. Anyway, yeah, so what I wanted to talk about in a pop tune, there's obviously a lot of repetition. The parts repeat. And, you know, unlike sort of the old days of when I started this, where when we would record, we would often sort of record from the beginning of the song to the end, and so there was a kind of a performance throughout the whole tune. These days, the way a lot of people do it, and probably many of you out there do it, is you just go, oh, I'm just going to do the chorus today, and so you work on the chorus, and you just keep working, and you add parts, and then when it comes to singing, you just sing it over and over again until you get the great chorus, and that's the chorus, and then you can copy and you can paste it. And it's the same every time, and certainly a lot of the music that we hear on the radio sounds like that. But I like to try to build in some, again, maybe because it was the 80s when I started all this, I like to sort of build in some dynamics and some changes as the song goes along. And I think even though a lot of music these days has a lot of repetition, I think there are subtle things that we can do to make them more interesting when the sections repeat themselves. And so what I wanted to show you with this tune was just how I kind of handled making each section different as it came around again. Now, when I recorded these, did I do the first intro and play all the parts and sing it, and then did I do the second repeat of the intro and play it all again and add new parts? And no, I definitely didn't. I did it the modern way of working, where when I was working on the song, I had 3 sections. I had the intro bit, I had the verse bit, and then I had the chorus bit. And basically I just did a stack of each. And sort of the way I work is I kind of freak out on the track a little bit. I just like put stuff in and just keep loading up the track, and it's a little messy. But you know, when I sort of have so much stuff in there and I'm in love with all the parts, then I start to kind of clean things up and weed them out. But once everything is cleaned up, I still usually have too many things in a section, and I think that's a common problem with most people have when they're producing, is sometimes it can be difficult to figure out what what can stay and what can go, and how much is just enough and how much is not enough and how much is too much. That's a really tough thing. So basically what I do is I work on each of the sections, the 3 sections, the intro, verse, chorus, and I just fill them up, clean them up, and then I've got too many things times 3. Then what I do is I move the blocks around and I assemble the piece the way that I want it to be. And you can see just from looking at the screen that, you know, there are some sections of this that sort of look like they have things in common. But it's not identical all the way across. And that is because I sort of decide what is the most important thing in each section, and then I build from there. So let's actually look at this. Let's look at the intro bit. So that is Shift 2. There's my marker for the intro bit. Let's have a listen to the first intro bit. Okay, so it's fairly obvious what I thought was important there. It's the vocal, and it's that little guitar, piano combination of things. So let's just hear a little bit of that again, just so that we have that locked in. There's the string bits as well, but the string bits are basically just supporting the piano and guitar part. Now, let's go to the second, the repeat of the intro, and let's hear what's different. Okay, so it sounds pretty different. Let's go back to the first one again for those that didn't catch it. On the wrong screen here. And the second one, right off the bat, there's those big background vocals, those big oohs. And there's also a shaker. So basically, just by adding the vocal element and the shaker, that section takes on a completely different sort of sound than it did in the first one. Now here's the third time it comes around, and let's have a listen to what's happening here. Okay, so I want to emphasize the lead vocal is copy and pasted. It's exactly the same every time. And that and the guitar piano part is exactly the same every time. The percussion parts are the same, just sometimes like with the shaker, the last time I turned it on, it was off the first time around. And this third time, I changed something else. The strings, instead of being sort of a percussive, short pizzicato kind of a sound, I went for a more sustained thing. And instead of having the vocals like they did in the second time sustain, here's the second one again. So the sustain element is the oohs. What I did was I wanted to echo that, but I wanted to do it with something else. So this time I did it with the strings. The other thing I did was I harmonized the lead vocal. So in the last one, you can hear that there was no lead harmony. Just the background harmonies. The lead vocal doesn't have any harmony on it. But in the last one, there's harmony on it. And then halfway through, I brought the oohs in again. Okay, and the shakers are in a different place than they were last time. Exactly the same shaker part, but I moved them a little bit. So let's hear those three sections back to back, and let's hear how they evolve throughout the tune. And even though the elements are identical in each one, just by turning things on and off, we can sort of really build those sections as we go through the tune. Okay, here's the first one again. Okay, here's the second one. Okay, and here is the third one.
No, you can't.
So I think it's pretty dramatic, the difference between those three different sections. It's very dramatic. Let me give you the full screen here. You know, I think just by adding a new element each time it comes around again, it can really make the production evolve to a new place as you get closer to the end, and certainly increase the intensity of it. And obviously I do this everywhere in my work. So let's look at the verse. The verse is a slightly different case, but let's have a listen to the first verse.
So I met someone new just the other day. Wasn't half as good as you. Still I try to forget how I felt. It didn't help. You can't.
Okay, so obviously we know what's important there. I felt that the vocal was the most important thing, and also just that little piano thing. So that's essentially all that's in there, plus a little bass. Now let's go to the second one, and there's some differences, but they're maybe a little more subtle.
Oh, I just can't seem to stay between the lines.
So just want to point out the first one right off the bat is I held over a bass note from the end of the chorus, which creates a little bit of tension. And so the idea with that was we're in the second verse, but oh, there's this weird note. Oh, we're somewhere new. Something new is happening. So let's have a listen to that again. So I'm going to go back to the first verse. Here it is just coming in.
So I met someone new just the other day. Wasn't.
Okay, and here's the second verse with that bass note hanging over, and you can hear the tension a little bit.
Oh, I just can't seem to stay between
And it drops
the
out
lines.
there.
Now my back's against the wall, 'cause my heart was left behind with him. Oh, with him. Oh, you.
Okay, so a couple other subtle differences. I added the shaker again, very subtle. I added more snare towards the end of it. And also the harmony is a little bit different. I added some harmony. So one more time, first verse.
So I met someone new just the other day. Wasn't half as good as you. Still I try to forget how I felt. It didn't help. You can't just.
Okay, and the second verse.
Oh, I just can't seem to stay between the lines. Now my back's against the wall, 'cause my heart was left behind with him. Oh, with him. Oh, you can't just.
Not to forget those ahs at the end there too. That was a new element as well. So again, exactly, the lead vocal is obviously different and the phrasing changes in the second verse. But you know, again, the elements are identical each time, but I think just by these subtle little changes, you can really change, you know, sort of the feeling of each section without having to redo the playing or redo the parts or pick a new sound or any of those kinds of things. Nadine, hi Nadine, is asking what is the delay on the keyboard part? And even though this is the newest session I have done, I haven't done it for a while, so I'll have to look. Here we go. It's this one, the Manny American delay. This is a Waves plugin, and oh my goodness, is it ever amazing! Highly recommended. All kinds of control. You can do left and right stuff independently. You can add reverb to the delay. You can distort it. You can double it. You can phase it. It's pretty awesome. So, so that's what I used. As you can see, it's turned off. And for those of you that have been in my sessions before, you know that one of the things that I like to do is I like to actually print or bounce to disk or render the effects on their own audio track. And a lot of people might think, man, that's crazy. That must take so much time. But, you know, in my production life, it would never fail. I would finish a session and, you know, I would wrap everything up. The people would get the mixes, and then I would put it away into archive. And maybe 3 years later, they would call me up and they would want me to, you know, change something in the track and bounce out another mix. And of course, you know, my software version would have changed 3 times, and my computer would have changed, and you know, everything would have changed. And of course, for those of you that have been doing this for a while, you know that when you upgrade everything, sometimes the old stuff doesn't work quite as well. And so what would end up happening every time was I would inevitably have to almost redo the entire track, the mix from scratch, and fix something and add a new sound here and new effect here, and it just never ended up being the same. So that my sort of policy became going forward that every single element in the track I bounce to disk, including all the effects, and that way if I have to pull them up, they're just WAV files, and I'm pretty sure for the rest of my lifetime we'll be able to read WAV files. So you can see even with my vocals here, these are the yellow tracks here are my vocal tracks. Let's zoom in on for you here. And somebody commented that it's not the clearest thing, and I'm sorry about that. I'm aware of that. We're trying to upgrade the equipment, but because of the whole pandemic situation, everyone is back ordered on all the cool products we're trying to get. So I'm sorry, but it will be better going forward. We will get this sorted out. So anyway, hopefully you can see enough for now. And again, feel free to send me an email and ask me a question. So this is the vocal. This is this top line here that I'm running my mouse over here. This is the intro bit. And then the next track is a modulation track, a delay track is the next track, and then I have 2 different reverb tracks. And if somebody wants to know about that, maybe we'll talk about that after we get through this thing that we're talking about now. But anyway, the bottom line is that I write all of the effects. And to me, it's really an important thing. And you can see these are the piano tracks that Nadine was asking about. This is the piano itself, and here's the Manny delay right below it here. Yeah, that is JG why I have so many tracks, is because I like to write all the effects. The other thing is, with my string parts in the intro, all this stuff, this is a combination of many elements. That's what these are here down the left here. So let's listen to what I use to combine here. So there's a glockenspiel here. Most of the tracks individually are pretty unremarkable. So then I have this up an octave. Okay, and then I have a string. And then another string sound down the octave. And then I have a symphony sound. It's a little more sustain on it. And then I have another one, low, and then here's the pits parts. So it's mostly just octaves, but if we put them all together, this is what happens. And in the context of the tune, so even though it sounds like one part, it's made up of many, many parts. And I tend to do a lot of that layering. And I think that also comes from the early days of synthesizers when individual sounds weren't very good, frankly. And, so one way that we got around that was by, having two keyboards MIDI together and choosing a sound on each one. And that way the kind of not so good sound would sound better because it was layered with something else. And if you go back and re-listen to all your favorites from the 80s, I think you'll hear, if you listen to the keyboard parts, you'll hear that there was an awful lot of layering going on in those days just to sort of improve the sounds. Obviously these days we have amazing sounds, like you can play a new keyboard, like Yamaha just put out this MODX keyboard, which is mind-blowing, and you can literally press one key and the sound can go for days and change and be awesome, and there's a wheel that you can blend between things. But I guess this is just sort of a leftover thing from the old days of my early days of learning, when I learned how to produce. So anyway, let's finish up what I was talking about. Track groups. Well, we can talk about that, Derek. Derek says the OCD in me wants to make track groups. I actually do, and we can talk about that too. But before we do that, let's finish off what we were doing here. This is the chorus. So here's chorus 1.
You can't just replace your yesterday, and love always finds us no matter the way. So just keep on running no matter what they say. You can't just replace no, you can't just replace your yesterday.
So that's the first chorus. Now, because the chorus is such a foundation in modern pop music, I try not to mess with it too much. But the big difference here is in the first chorus, Siobhan was doing a lot of the singing in her head voice. Like for men, that's your falsetto. Women call it a head voice. That soft sound that is lovely. And in the second chorus, she tends to sing more in her chest voice, which is the belty voice. And so it's a little bit different there. The track is mostly the same, and the biggest difference I think that you'll hear is I added there's a cello bit that wasn't in the first one. This part down here, the cello bit. So let's listen for that. This is the cello bit. Okay, so let's go back and have another listen to the first chorus again, just see if you missed the cello bit. Oops. You can't just replace your yesterday, and love always finds us no matter. Just doesn't sound quite as full. Again, for those having trouble hearing it, but other than that, everything is the same other than the lead vocal, which has a little bit more intensity. Then I did a fun little thing, which was I brought the chorus back. I skipped a third verse. We went straight from the intro bit into back into the chorus, but we had a really broken down chorus, which is again a pretty typical production technique in a lot of music. Here's the broken down, and again Siobhan sings this really quietly in her head voice. No, you can't just replace your yesterday, and love always finds us no matter the way. So just keep on running no matter what they say. But again, it sounds like new parts, but those piano parts, the sort of arpeggiated thing, it's in there. It's just there's no drums in the quiet one, so you can hear it better. Here's the previous chorus. Oh, you the drums and the bombast of all that's kind of skew it, but here it is just quiet and broken down, and it sounds like new parts, but it's exactly the same stuff that's in the previous one.
No, you can't just replace your yesterday. And love always finds us no matter the way. So just keep on running no matter what they say.
So pretty cool, and I turned them up in the mix a little bit too to feature them. Now, how do you get from a quiet chorus to the final end chorus? Well, you need a big crazy note with a reverse reverb effect on it and a distortion on the vocal. Here we go.
Can't just replace.
One more time. Here we go.
Can't just replace your yesterday. And love always finds us no matter the way. So just keep on running no matter what they say. Can't just replace your.
And then we just loop around, tag at the end, the same thing. And that's about it. But anyway, the whole thing I wanted to sort of reveal here was just from the point of view of arranging, sometimes we think we have to add all these new parts and we have to work really hard and replay things over and over again. And that's not always necessary to do, and it's not always even the best strategy. Sometimes if we just take what we have in each section and we strip it down and we kind of look at it different ways, and we bring one element out in one section and one element out in another section, it sort of can create all of the interest that we're looking for in giving the song some dynamic shape. So this is one example, and this is how I typically do it. But certainly depending on the arrangement and the song and what the instrumentation is, and whether it's real instruments or programmed instruments as it was here, it can change from song to song. But hopefully that gives you guys sort of a little bit of insight into one way to do it, and hopefully that's a little bit inspiring for making your next productions a little bit more interesting, hopefully. Now let's deal with some of these things here. The group thing. Let's talk about why I have so many tracks. Let's break that down first. And I think there was a question of how many tracks I have. I've got some stuff that's not in it. I did some guitar parts that I didn't end up using. And again, that happens a lot with me. I throw things away. The cutting room floor is littered with stuff in my work. Because again, my process is I kind of freak out on the song, put all the stuff in, and then, even though I'm in love with all the parts, again, for those of you that have been in my session before, I mix in a slightly unconventional way. I don't start with the kick drum and the drums like most people do. I start with the vocal all by itself, vocal, and that's it. And then I bring things in under the vocal, and if anything takes my ear away from the vocal, it's not in the song. And so in the case of this one, these were some guitar parts that took my ear away. I think there's some other muted stuff in. Oh, maybe that was it. Maybe that's the only thing that isn't in the track. There was a Wurlitzer piano part that was doubling the piano part with some distortion, but I didn't need it. Had another cool little delay thing which seemed superfluous, so I got rid of that. But the total track count here is 84. I know, that's excessive, I know. But look at what I've got here. There's not, like I print individual effects. So let's look at the vocals alone, because the vocals occupy from track 45 to 84. So that's almost 40 tracks of vocals. And certainly there isn't 40 vocal tracks in this. It's just all these effects that I'm printing. So if we go back to the top vocal here, here's vocal 1. And then, we might as well break it down. What's my vocal thing? So I have the main track, and then I have, always use 4 effects on my vocal. The first one is always a sort of a chorusy modulation thing. Let's see if I still have them in the session here. I don't. I took them out. But there's a plugin from Waves called, I can show you, called Real ADT, which is pretty fantastic. It's an Abbey Road thing. And what it does is, you can see it moving here. What it does is it sort of dynamically choruses and pitches the vocal, and it just makes everything sound kind of fat. So I always use a little bit of that, just for perspective. It sounds like this. Here's the vocal by itself. So that's dry vocal. Here's the real ADT. So if you put them together, if I turn it up a little bit, it just makes it a little wider. I'm not sure how much you're going to be able to hear over the internet. Then I add a delay, and I've got a whole bunch of favorite delays, but here's the delay. Let's turn that up a bit. Okay, so that's the second effect that I use, which just kind of, again, lengthens things. And then I use two reverbs. The first one is a hall reverb. Which, again, is in this context very subtle. And that just sort of gives it some atmosphere. I don't like the hall to be too long. And then usually the reverb that people can actually hear in the mix is the plate reverb. That one's a little bit longer. So I find that the blend of all of it, you know, if we just have the lead vocal on its own, and again, I'm not sure how much you're going to hear over the internet, but this is the dry vocal. And then if we put all this stuff in, it just sounds kind of creamy and sort of ambient and thick and nice. It's a nice. So just kind of like a record, like a finished sound as opposed to the dry sound. So that's 5 tracks just for that part of the vocal, and then I've separated the verse vocal, and again has the 4. So there's 5 more for the verse vocal, and then this is the chorus vocal. So 5 more there. So just for the lead vocal, there's 15 tracks. Why do I separate all the vocals? Well, because as you heard in the arrangement, the verse only has just that delay piano. So if I had the lead vocal at the same level as I had it in the verse part, it's going to be too loud. So this way, if each section is on its own track, I can just do a mix for each section. I don't have to do a lot of automation, which I still do some automation when I want things to change dynamically. But with putting each thing on its own track, that way I can just kind of set the level and leave it, and the only time I have to automate is if something needs to come up just briefly or whatever. So it saves me a lot of time writing automation. Then I've got, this is the affected track here with that reverse reverb thing, this bit that I played you earlier. And then again, here's another 10 tracks just with the double of the chorus, because it's not a single vocal in the chorus, it's her lead vocal and then a double to the left and a double to the right with all the effects as well. So again, there's another 10 tracks, and then all the harmony stuff is down below is the same. And as you can see, I've got 4 tracks of effects to go with each of the harmony. And I tend to group up the harmony stuff a little bit more. And for automating, because it's all cut up into little bits, for automating, I'll just do automation on each of the clips, so that way I don't have to actually write the curves. I did some work and some extensive teaching in another DAW that all the automation has to be done, drawing the little line up and down. And basically got carpal tunnel syndrome from that. So I try not to do that if I don't have to. So yeah, so that's why there's so many tracks, and I just showed you the layers with the string parts, and so I just like to keep everything separately. In terms of the groups, I do have groups, as a matter of fact, and they are over here. I will show you. What I do after I've got all the individual levels is I have groups for background vocal, I have groups for drums, I have groups for the instruments, and usually a vocal group. And so anyway, I do have groups, and I process the groups as well. So I get a second level. Again, one of my big philosophies with mixing is not to do too much processing at any one stage. I found when I used to work in studios with hardware outboard gear, you can crank, like 10 decibels of compression, and it sounds amazing with a hardware compressor. But as soon as I started working digitally and I started using plugins, it's better now, but in the early days, if you had 10 decibels of compression using a plug-in compressor, it sounded awful. So I just kind of developed this technique where I did little bits in a few different places. And what's cool about it is I'm able to get more transparent compression. You don't hear it as much. And the other thing that I like about it is I can use each of the different compressors that I use to impart their own sort of sound, which is neat. And the third level, which for those of you that are new to this may sound confusing, but we could maybe talk about it in a future session, is playing with the attack and release characteristics of each compressor. You can sort of shape the tone as well, change the transient on the front and make the sustain a little bit different, and you can do it in stages, so you can really shape the sound. It's almost, using multiple compressors is almost like an EQ in the sense that you can really shape it and change the sound using the processors. You don't have to change the actual patch or guitar tone or what you've recorded at the source. You can actually do so much afterwards with plugins. It's pretty awesome. So I do lots of processing as well on the groups, and then there's some stuff on the 2-mix as well. Okay, what else have we got here? Hey Omar, can you explain how you approach the various instrument voicing ranges to the lead vocal so you get the best overall dynamic sound? This is a topic, thank you for asking that, Omar. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And it took me many, many years to kind of get a handle on this, because I, like a lot of people, that kind of was just really excited about this in the early days, and we'd write a song and we'd just like put a guitar part in, and then we'd add another guitar part playing the same thing, and then the piano would be in the same place, and then I'd add a pad in the same voicings in the same place. And then when I was mixing, I couldn't hear the vocal, because there was like 4, 5, 10 elements that all lived within the same frequency as the vocal. And so one of my strategies, and again, I recommend everyone do this, and I know this doesn't always happen, and it didn't always happen for me either, but these days it's essential. Anyone who does any new work with me knows that as soon as we've written the song and put down sort of a guide guitar or piano track, the next thing that goes in is a guide vocal. And when I am working, I'm sure my kids can attest to this because they hear the songs over and over and over again while I'm working on them. Anyone that has heard me work can attest to the fact that that vocal never comes out. The vocal is always there. And it's not only when I'm mixing does stuff end up on the cutting room floor that interferes with the vocal, it's also when I'm doing the arrangement. And so I don't analyze the frequency of the vocal necessarily off. Sometimes I do, but usually I just listen to the vocal, and if it's in this range, then my instrument part has to be in this range or this range or this range. But I try not to make it sort of in the same range as the vocal. And again, oftentimes, like with my string parts there, you saw that I did octaves. Sometimes I'll do 3 or 4 octaves just to try them out. And again, the decisions are based on, oh, that octave is interfering with the vocal. See you later. It's not in the track anymore. So I'm very, very aware of that the entire time I'm working on arrangement. And that's whether I'm working with MIDI instruments or whether I'm working with live musicians. When I had my studio and guitar players would come in, I often had to make sure that the guitar players I worked with were really, really skilled, because they'd be playing a guitar part and they'd be playing a voicing in one place on the neck, and I'm like, ah, man, that's rubbing the vocal. Can we change the voicing? And so they'd be doing all these weird kind of things to try to find a different place to play it. But that's really, really important to me, and I think the key to that is get the vocal in early and never take it out. And when you mix, start with the vocal, as weird as that sounds. Make the vocal sound huge, and then just bring things around it. When you do it the other way, and this happened to me for years, and I couldn't figure out why until later. You start with the drums, you make the drums sound great, then you add the bass, and the bottom end is huge, and then you add these wide guitars and these pads and the keyboards and the horns, and you get this massive track, and there's no vocal in it. And then you put the vocal in, you've already used up all the room. There's nowhere else to put anything. So what you end up doing is you kind of dumb down or thin out the vocal just so that it'll sit there, or you make it too bright so that it'll cut. And that's not the kind of mix I want to hear. I want to hear the vocal be the most prominent thing. And if I'm going to dumb down anything else, it's going to be the stuff around the vocal. And so that starts early in the process for me. Even when I'm working on the arrangement, the vocal is in, and I try never to put a track or a part down that is conflicting with it in any way. So that's that. Let's go back to the questions here. What else? Would love to hear the version with all the parts in it to hear the difference. Well, Nadine, you are hearing that at the end, because everything that, maybe you're talking about the guitar parts that I took out. They're out for a reason, I would say. I don't think it sounded good. The part was cool, but I don't think it sounded good, which is why it's gone. And actually, I meant to delete it before we got on here, and then I was hungry, and things happen. So, but certainly, if there's enough demand for that, I could probably do a little mix of that section with the guitar or whatever, if people want to hear that. Printing effects. What I mean by that is I set up the effect, and then I actually bounce to disk. So in the same way that we're finished the whole mix and we go export, I'll just show you. You go export from the file menu, audio mix down, and we get this window. I can choose where I bounce from. So right now it's set to the stereo output, but I can actually I can choose any of my effects tracks, or I can bounce from any of the individual tracks as well. So when I'm bouncing effects, I basically, instead of having it come from the stereo out, which would be the entire mix going through it, I just can click the effect that I want and then export the audio. And then it'll only bounce what's coming out of that channel. So I go through and I do that for each of the individual effects, and then I have them on their own individual tracks, and then I can just use a fader. They're audio, they're WAV files. And then I can turn off the effects, which is great too, because it saves computer processor. And it just makes everything for me easier. And if I have to recall, that's the biggest reason. If I have to recall the song, then it's all there, which is fantastic. So, okay, what else have we got here? Omar, speaking of compression, do you add 2-to-1 ratio to the overall finished tracks. Well, again, that's a place where I use multiple layers of compression, not as much as I do earlier. Sometimes I'll use 3 compressors early on, but let's take a look at what's in my 2 mix here. So the first thing that I have in my 2 mix is this Slate Revival, which is sort of like an oral exciter. It lets you, let's go to the big screen here. It sort of lets you add top end sheen and some sort of thickness in the bottom. So from through the camera there, I'm sure you can't see, it's not doing a whole lot. It's pretty subtle, but I'm adding just a teeny bit on the bottom and a teeny bit on the top. The next thing that I go through is this console. It's a virtual mix bus Slate thing. And I'm a big fan of the API stuff. That's what I record through. So I can set this to all these different settings, but I typically like the API thing. I drive it a bit, which compresses a little bit as well. So even though it's not a compressor, it's giving me a little bit of compression. The next thing that I hit is a Manley EQ, which is, again, just doing some subtle correcting, just trying to make things more balanced to my ear. And then there's compression here. This is my favorite 2-mix bus compression. It's an API 2500. It's in the UAD stuff, which is an older system now, but they just keep coming out with these amazing plugins that are fantastic. So API 2500. And again, I don't do too much compression. It's not working too hard here. And you know, if you watch the needle while it's going, it's just barely flickering a little bit, like it's just kind of doing a tiny little dance, not too much. And the ratio Omar was asking about is like around 1.5, so not very high at all. And then this is a plugin that everyone should just own. It's the Slate FGX. It just makes things loud and it doesn't ruin them. And here I use 2-to-1 compression. And again, I like it just dancing a little bit. Let's see what's going on here. This is 1. So I'm getting about half dB of compression there, probably half there, half there. And then what you're hearing right now is my mix. This isn't the master. So you know, when it goes to mastering, there's more compression added there as well. There's lots of compression, and you know, individual tracks can have anywhere from 5 to 10 decibels depending on, you know, what I'm doing with them. So my stuff is very compressed, but I'm hoping that it doesn't sound too compressed. I don't want it to have that crushed thing. I want it to still sound dynamic and musical, and I just like it to be smooth and level and sort of everything have its place. So so there's lots of compression, but I don't do too much at the end. It's just more to kind of bring the elements together. Okay, is there anything else? Nadine will probably talk offline about all this stuff. Is there any other questions? JG, how are we doing? Is there anything else that we need to talk about here? I think we've got it. You know what I'm going to do is, if there's nothing else, I'm just going to play us out. But before I go, I just want to say thanks for everyone coming out. It looks like we've had quite a few folks, and I know this is long for a webinar. Like webinars are, you know, usually max out at an hour, and we've been going for an hour 20, I think. So thanks so much for being here. And again, I want to thank JG for helping me out. And again, please, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, or you have ideas for a future session, or just comments or feedback on any of this, again, this is the first thing we've ever done. And we're hoping it's successful, and we want to make it better, and we'll be able to do that faster with your help. So Please send us some feedback. Let us know what you thought. Let us know where you're from, because we'd love to know how many folks are just our usual Toronto folks, which are all very special. Usual not meaning that I don't appreciate you. I appreciate you very much. But hopefully, those of you that are in other parts of the country that haven't tuned in before, maybe hopefully you found this useful, and hopefully we'll see you again. Anyway, without further ado, I think that's probably it. So I'll play you out with Siobhan's tune one more time, and my hope is that when you hear the song, after we've broken it down a little bit, maybe it sounds a little bit different. And for those of you that actually like the song, not as just a curiosity, but something you'd like to listen to, it's on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube and all those places if you just search for it. So thanks for your time. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you got something out of this, and we'll see you next time.
You can't just replace your yesterday, and love always finds us no matter the way. So just keep on running no matter what they say. You can't just replace no, you can't just replace your yesterday. Oh, oh. I just can't seem to stay between the lines. Now my back's against the wall, 'cause my heart was left behind with him. With him. Oh, you can't just replace your yesterday, and love always finds us no matter the way. So just keep on running no matter what they say. You can't just replace no, you can't just replace your yesterday. Oh, 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 oh.